They called themselves the Sisters of Fornication, and their philosophy amused the Archangel Asmodeus. There were hundreds of them, women who had come together to form a cult of their own design. No man was allowed to pleasure them, for they had pledged themselves to serving only one male phallus. And because Asmodeus had little interest in them, they gained their required pleasure from the joining of the feminine with the feminine. Asmodeus tolerated their devotion, for he found their efforts were changing human society for the better. As members of the fallen went, Asmodeus was particularly unique in the delights he wished to sample on earth. He had no desire to kill, for that robbed him of his fun. In the depths of hell, Asmodeus had been in charge of those who sentenced themselves through the sin of lust, and here on earth it was his wish to create a modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah. Those cities of ancient lore had known no hint of restraint or morality, and under Asmodeus's guidance, he hoped to reduce the human race into a cavorting and sexually obsessed subspecies that had little care for consent or the horrific diseases they might be spreading. No form of sexual depravity was too low for him, and at his back, an army of demons waited eagerly to be served by those brought down to the very basest level of human depravity. This was not to claim that pain was not an aspect of his regime, because the pleasures of the flesh came in many forms. In the countries of Australia and New Zealand, as well as the host of Pacific islands that might have otherwise escaped scrutiny, his regime was perhaps the most forgiving in the lives that were spared. But at what cost to an individual's immortal soul? The laws he had established were clear and ruthlessly enforced. And just as in hell, the people under his dominion had no choice but to descend into a hedonistic madness that risked damnation and insanity in so many. If you wanted to eat in his world, you had to prove the depths of human indulgence you were willing to plunge headfirst into. The Sisters of Fornication were an example of this. With their numbers growing, they roamed the city streets in packs in search of women to forcibly convert. They were easy to spot, for they all wore nuns' habits and little else, and all of them carried the seal of Satan that spared them the attentions of the vile creatures that had so recently made an appearance. Pity any man they came across, for in their eyes, the male of the species was deemed inadequate and ripe for the harshest abuse. Even the strongest male caught alone would suffer such severe mutilation that they would be lucky to survive. Many would beg for death after the sisters had their way. Ironically, Asmodeus gained little delight in his own fornication. He had tried it in so many ways, both in hell and here, and yet the acts performed lacked any real satisfaction. It was as if he had concocted his own personal hell, where he hunted for some sort of futile release, only to be forever disappointed. The last few days, he had become more of a bored voyeur, who was starting to realize how limited the real world of man was. In hell, a soul could suffer endless torment, but on earth, there were so many ways for a body to die.